and thanks for coming. Before we begin, I'd like to say a couple of thanks, of course, to Alan and Jim for putting this together, to my sweetheart, Kateri Ewing, who spoke last week, and she's certainly, she's the tech mind in the family, and to Adam Hansen, who did the drone photography. He's the local drone pilot. So between all three or four or five of us, we've managed to hopefully put together a nice show, and let's get it going, see what happens. Okay. And I will try and note where Peter Potter's photos are. There's several good ones. There's several that aren't his, that he wouldn't want to take credit for anyway. Those are mine. All right, so let's begin. Okay, how do I begin? Okay.
Morning. Welcome to East Aurora, New York. Welcome to Roycroft. You notice I didn't say welcome to the Roycroft. I said welcome to Roycroft. I tend to think there's a big difference between the two, and it's a difference that we may discern as we go through our time together on the campus this morning. I'm standing here in front of the Roycroft Inn, which, as the sign will tell you right there, was opened in 1905, largely to accommodate the huge crowds that were coming to see who this Elbert Hubbard character was. And of course, Elbert, being no dummy at all, he said, well, as long as people are coming, they're going to need a place to stay, so why don't we build them one? And they did. The idea of Roycroft, though, is older than 1905. It's more 10, let's call it 11 years before, when Elbert, fresh from his trip to England in 1894, discovered the idea of William Morris and John Ruskin. And as he came back to the United States after his grand trip, he began a small printing press in this part of the building right here. And he realized right away that it would be a successful business, but it was going to be bigger than a press, bigger than a building, even bigger than this huge campus full of buildings. Roycroft, as it evolved under Elbert Hubbard's watch, was and continues to be the American manifestation of the arts and crafts philosophy. It was a way of being, a way of rejecting the dehumanizing, the debilitating features of the Industrial Revolution, a way of incorporating art into industry, a way of caring for people at work and play, from the laborer, from the entry-level employee, all the way up to the highest administrator. In Morris's words, which Hubbard had carved right over there in the print shop onto an oak header, art is the expression of man's joy in his work. Now, let's be very clear from the beginning. Elbert Hubbard and John Ruskin were two very, very different fellows. Now, John Ruskin was a philosopher, a writer, a social critic, and an accomplished artist in many, many media. Elbert Hubbard was also a philosopher, and he was a writer, and he was a social critic, but more in the Mark Twain and Will Rogers vein. But he was also an entrepreneur and an accomplished salesman. He was the kind of fellow that, he was a young man when this started. He was 38. He was that kind of guy that maybe if they'd had one of those, entrepreneur top 40, under 40 back then, he would have made it. But I think it's very fair to say that without John Ruskin and his philosophy, there's no Roycroft. And without William Morris and his philosophy and his artistry, there is no Roycroft. All that was and is Roycroft began with Hubbard's visit in 1894 to England, where he met Ruskin at Brentwood, and where he first encountered that idea of head, heart, and hand. And as we've incorporated Ruskin's famous saying into everything we do around here, working with the head, heart, and hand, and mixing enough play with work so that every task is pleasurable, makes for health and happiness. I doubt that Hubbard himself actually understood how big this notion of Roycroft would become when he started. I think that he started as a printing press, but that Ruskinian philosophy that was within him grew and diffused itself through this whole campus, through the whole enterprise. It's fascinating. And he grew with it, and he began to take it. And run with it. Now, I've lived with Roycroft for all of my 70 years. As a kid growing up in the neighborhood was my playground. Right over there. I grew up not 200 feet from right here. And we'll see that, of course, in a little while. And of course, I've been a diner at the various iterations of the restaurant, and a reveler in a few of the nightclubs that they've had over the years. I've been an ad hoc tour guide, an ambassador for out-of-town visitors who show up in East Aurora and go, what is this Roycroft business everybody talks about? I've been a contractor here, doing various projects in many, many parts of the campus. I was a fundraiser when the Inn in 1995 was in desperate need of rehabilitation. It was in sad shape, and a bunch of us as a community got together and raised money to make sure that we could save this beautiful building. And I've also been a member of Harvard's Art Council, which annually confers awards on artists whose work is judged to be in the spirit of Roycroft. And now I'm a writer in residence. It's a fairly lofty term, but it basically means I have a studio over here in the print shop. We'll see that in a little bit. And I notice that as I work here almost daily, the spirit of Roycroft infuses itself in my work and certainly in my teaching. I see Roycroft campus in times of glory and grandeur, and in times of ruin and neglect, and almost collapse. But now I see Roycroft as part of the community's present and future. It's vibrant, while it still maintains those vital links to our history. It's truly a place to come to understand arts and crafts in the 21st century. As I become one of the community elders, a keeper of the stories, and one whose glance backward goes the farthest, I believe that there's some magic here that has kept the Roycroft spirit alive even in the darkest days. It's magic you can still feel, just as if you listen really carefully, you can hear echoes of those Roycrofters of days gone by. Come along for a little ramble around Roycroft. With the help of videographer Adam Hansen, drone pilot, we'll take a tour of the Roycroft so you get a sense of its size, its architecture, its aura, and the magic that's there. And if you're really, really careful, and if you tune into it, you may just be able to hear a little bit of John Ruskin's magic of the arts and crafts that started in England and has its manifestation right here on South Grove Street in East Aurora, New York.
We're going to start right at the beginning, not the Roycroft's beginning, but my beginning. That is actually me, 1950s. There's a photo, not from Peter Potter, but probably from my mother with a Brownie Star Flash camera at 472 Oakwood Avenue, which is just a couple hundred feet from the Roycroft. Here's a bunch of us playing on that same day, probably 1955, 56, at 472 Oakwood. And look what you see through my backyard, just beyond. Look at that big old building there. What do you suppose that is? Well, we're going to find out in a minute, because the magic of the drone is going to take us through my backyard and right over to about maybe 100 feet or so, to right here, to the Roycroft. This, of course, is the south entrance to the Roycroft Inn. And we're revving up our engines here, and we're going to take a little flight around the building. Imagine you're 5 years old, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and this is your backyard. This is what you play. This is where we played every day, to the point where I thought, why doesn't everybody have a Roycroft in their backyard? It's pretty cool to take this little flight now. We never got to do this when we were kids. But look at where we're going right now. We're going right here, and there. Let's just pause for a second. Take a look at that blue house with the curious yellow garage. I'm not sure why the current owners did that, but that's where I grew up. You could see the yard is just over next to the Roycroft parking lot. Now, there's fences there now, unfortunately. It's kind of sad, but in the 21st century, we all build fences. Back in my day, in the 50s, 60s, nobody had a fence. And so our path to Roycroft was simply walking from one yard to a next into the parking lot and playing everywhere around that whole campus, around the inn. We didn't think anything of it. Look how big it is. Imagine playing there. Think about how much fun that would be to play hide and seek, play Army Man, to play capture the flag. But for Elbert, it was really different. This part here, I hope you can see my cursor. This is where the original print shop was. This is where Elbert first started printing the Philistine in 1895. And he, none of this, imagine everything to the right here isn't even here yet. Elbert's house was probably around here somewhere. Obviously, that was since taken down to make room for the inn. But this is where he started. This is where it all begins in 1895 after that momentous trip he took to England, where he really wanted to connect with these writers, the kind of writers that he wanted to be. So we're going to take a tour of the whole campus, beginning sort of chronologically. So here we are. This is the first thing he did. And we're going to go right now over to the chapel. There we go. So Elbert, as things began to heat up, shall we say, at Roycroft, as he began to have a little success, he needed to have at least a place where people could get together. People began to come to work for him. People began to wonder who he was and come and talk to him. So he built what's called the chapel. Now, the chapel it has a religious connotation for many of us, but it's not really a religious building. This was a meeting house, a guild hall, if you will, for people who were involved in his printing business. And one of the things that he did that's so remarkable, and it is so part of the whole notion of arts and crafts, is that everyone who worked for him, everyone was invited to come to talks at this guild hall. They might have been philosophy, they might have been science, they might have been health, literature, music, the news of the day. Elbert asked all of them to come to this beautiful stone building modeled after, of course, the buildings he had seen in England and have a talk. Sometimes, of course, he would moderate. He was that kind of guy. He wasn't shy. But sometimes he would have guest speakers come in, and some very famous people came to talk about Roycroft. It was pretty a remarkable change in the notion of how you treat your employees. What a gorgeous building to have, so that you can come and just sort of relax and listen and have your important meetings. You know, for many years it was the town hall for the town of Aurora. It's a great place to come. I cast my first presidential vote for George McGovern. Of course, it didn't seem to go well for George, but in 1972 it was still the town hall. Now you'll find that the chapel is administrated by the Roycroft Inn. And it is a lovely place to have your gathering, a wedding, your meeting place. You could have any kind of banquet you want there. The inside is remarkably the same as it was in the early 1900s. The church pews do give it that church feeling, but it really is not a church at all. For a while it was, I got to tell you about this door. This is the first of the Roycroft doors. Elbert was big on doors, having messages on them. Here is the famous Ruskinian motto: life without industry is guilt. Industry without art is brutality. he had that put on one of the first doors in the first buildings on the campus. And as part of sort of my ongoing part of the campus, I do the writing stuff, but this is one of my projects. Hopefully for this winter, this door is going to be removed, and I'm going to refinish it so it looks like it belongs on an arts and crafts campus. It's 120 years old, so it's ready for a little TLC, and that's part of my job. I'm going to make sure it gets some of that. So this is the second building on our tour of the campus. This building is the print shop. This is a marvelous structure. Elbert was getting pretty successful early on. He printed that Message to Garcia, which sold hundreds of thousands of copies. So it was a little motivational talk, but it sold so many copies. At one time they said it was second only to the Bible in number of copies in print. Who knows if that's actually the case. But he had to build a place to print these things. Now look at this 3-story building. One of the floors is sort of underground. Printing presses were there. You're going to hear about that from Dr. Joe Weber next Saturday. And on the second floor was binding, illuminating, and putting all these things together for mailing. And then up top were meeting rooms, big, huge meeting rooms. They had music up there. They had all kinds of drama, more of that philosophy of caring for the people that work here. So it's not drudgery. Yes, you worked hard, and and the pay I suspect wasn't grand, but it was a wonderful place to work. Made so by Elbert, made so by this notion of Ruskin. The tower is really cool. I had the pleasure of painting that tower. I have, unbeknownst to management, spent some time on the top of the tower. It's a commanding view of the village. Look how this campus was sort of shoehorned into the village. There was nothing there to begin with. There was really, there were a couple of homes, but here is where it all began. The printing, the idea of what would put Roycroft on the map, 1901. And some of of course, the things that Elbert printed were, here's the first magazine, a periodical of protest. God help the rich, the poor can work. Interesting, huh? And this magazine is what you subscribe to for 10 cents or $1 for 12 copies. And they were wonderful little sayings, little brief little articles that Elbert expounding on philosophy, on the value of work, on the value of relationships, on the value of being decent to your fellow man. And he was also a funny guy. But these were printed on what he called butcher paper, because as he said, of course, cue the laughter, the meat's on the inside. And let's also remember A Message to Garcia. And I think we have, see this, these are the Little Journeys. He published a series of books called Little Journeys to the Homes of Good Men and Great by Elbert Hubbard. And of course, the first one was to John Ruskin's home, in which he relates his discussion with John Ruskin. Fascinating stuff. And we have to remember that big old building. Take a look at this building. Look at the stones. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the mythology, and I think it's actually truth rather than mythology, those stones all came from local farms. People thought Elbert was a bit of an odd duck, of course. He didn't dress the way normal people, business people did. He didn't wear his hair the same way. And he had some odd ideas, which I'm sure caused concern and perhaps some discussion in private circles in the village. But when he found that he needed to build a big old building like this, he said, "Farmers, bring me your stones, I'll buy them." And farmers, of course, were absolutely amazed. What do you mean you'll buy them? And hey, they were just in the way in their fields. And of course, East Aurora at the time was a largely agricultural area. The village itself was only a couple thousand people, and it was surrounded completely by farms. So Elbert said, for $1, you fill up your buckboard, you fill up your flatbed wagon and your horse-drawn vehicle of any sort with rocks, and I'll give you $1. And the lore has it that they lined up around the block and all chuckling away. Can you imagine this guy is actually giving us money? Now, the tower we were just looking at, this is a Peter Potter photo. This is looking from that tower. This is where Albert and Alice used to hang out. And they had a commanding view. That's the chapel that we just left. And that's Main Street, East Aurora, right there. And this was a remarkable place. I've spent lots of time up there doing work and just sort of hiding. But you get to see from these windows, you'll look across the street and see the inn. And you can look on the other side and see the other buildings, the copper shop and stuff. It's a remarkable building. Now, I think we're going to head over. Yes, indeed. We're going to take a break from buildings, and Adam is going to take us down the Appian Way. The Appian Way is called, of course, based on the Appian Way in Rome, and it's a walkway between the inn and the copper shop. There's our resident cloven-hoofed vegetarians munching away. They like the acorns, I guess. And just if you'll grant me a couple seconds of self-indulgence here, the Roycrofters at Large Association sells these commemorative bricks on the pathway. And my parents, who brought us up over at that house on Oakwood, are not buried in East Aurora, sadly. But we had this stone put there, and it's right on the Appian Way. And it has right by one of those benches. And as Alan, I'm sure, will attest, occasionally you'll see me having lunch or having a cup of coffee. It's a great way to spend a little time with my parents, who had the forethought to raise us in that incredible house on Oakwood Avenue in the Roycroft's backyard. So now we're going to go to the copper shop. The copper shop is 1902. Things were really happening on the Roycroft campus. It was beginning and it was evolving. I never had the sense, and Alan, is more of a scholar on this than I am, but I never had the sense that that Elbert Hubbard laid out a blueprint and said, okay, in this year I want to do this, and this year I'm going to build a print shop. I think it evolved. And I think that sense that he had from Ruskin and Morris kept growing in him, and he was seeing that it was working. And so it made sense to have craftsmen come here. And craftsmen, this was where the copper happened. It was originally the blacksmith shop. It was known as the second blacksmith shop. However, hammer copper was introduced in 1904. And eventually the Roycroft became known for the copper work, beautiful work. Now, of course, it's been remodeled, thank God, and rebuilt where it needed to be. And it is now a gallery. Wonderful arts and crafts style, artisan items there, all kinds of gifts. So Elbert knew that it was time to have an inn, to have this place for people to come. And so it became absolutely necessary to have furniture. And he said, well, why don't we build that furniture? So they put together this shop. This is not the most artistic building, not the most interesting architecture on the campus, but this is the furniture shop. All that beautiful furniture you see, and we'll see in a minute when we go inside the inn, was built right here. If you've ever been to the Grove Park Inn, much of that furniture was also built right there and shipped down there. These days, of course, it is there is a furniture shop down in the lower left in the basement. There's a pottery. There is a great antique store run by the Deluski family. Those guys are a bunch of characters. They have a lot of fun. Um, they have lots of the original Roycroft publications. It's a good place to get those. Plus, they have regular antiques and all manner of oddments. This building used to be 3 stories tall, but a horrible fire, probably, I don't know, I guess must be 35, 40 years ago now, took the top floor off. But there it is, another one of those doors. Now we're going to come to the gem of the campus, and this is the Roycroft Inn. Elbert realized that he needed a place for people to stay, and he wasn't going to put up a Motel 6. He was going to put up a gorgeous place. I love this building. As I've said, I've lived with this building, not in this building, and been a part of this building for all of my life, even when I was a little kid. Here again, this was a 30-second walk from my house. Now, this is the peristyle, outdoor dining. And so imagine this, 1960, 1961, the Buffalo Bills, newly minted team in the American Football League franchise. They stayed here for those first 2 years. I would have been 10 and 11. And right on this stone wall here, I would have played. I would have had these huge, gigantic men from down south who would come and they would actually sit on this wall with us, and we'd bring a little football and we'd get to play catch with them. It was an amazing, amazing place. So I think Adam's going to take us on a little tour here with his fancy machine, which is really good. On how to look at things. I think that was his shadow there. So now we're coming around the corner. This is the main entrance. And I like to tell people when they come to Roycroft that they can actually see my house if they stand right in that door and look at the house I grew up in. Pretty cool. Here's Elbert with his doors again. You know, and do you get that sense that is there a theme that you're gathering when you see his sayings? This is inside, and I told Alan I was going to offer this up for anyone. I think if you have not been to Roycroft, here's the deal. You do the you come and you take a tour with Alan and sign up for one of those, and you will get as good a reading on what Roycroft, the campus, the inn, all the buildings, arts and crafts, etc. You'll get a good reading on all that. And then after that's done, come over here and have a beer with me. And by golly, you will have a 3-dimensional experience of what Roycroft is. Here's the salon. This is the place where Elbert Hubbard in 1915, in April, as he was getting ready to get on to Lusitania, gathered all of his family employees here and said, hey, you know, if this doesn't work out, you know, I'm my son Elbert. He's got a good head and clean hands, and his heart is in the right place. So carry on. And that's what they were able to do. But look at the furniture here. This is all made across the street at the furniture shop. The Navajo rugs, they were not made here, but that's part of the Roycroft style. Peter Potter photo, and the last one was too. Sorry, thank you, Kiteri. Luckily, I have a prompter in the background here to remind me. I wanted to show Mary. Wait a minute. Okay. Well, that was the salon. A great place to hang out. Actually, I'm going to do that. So just take a second. No, I'm just going to do it right here. Sorry about that. I want to show you something. I think it's important. In the salon, of course, once a year, Kiteri and I and several other people who are very much involved in the local arts community, we host a dinner. And during that dinner, we give an award in honor of this woman right here, Mary Roloff Stott, who was Elbert Hubbard's granddaughter. And Mary's husband and her children have endowed an award through the Hubbard family that we annually give to artists in any media. We've had theater and painting and writing and music and speaking and dance and costume design, all kinds of things. But we try to honor people whose work is in the spirit of Roycroft, which is an abstract thing, but we think we have a pretty good handle on what the spirit of Roycroft is. So once a year, we give a lovely award with a little cash bonus, and it goes to people in the community who are keeping this notion, the spirit of Roycroft, alive. Beautiful furniture. Come and sit, and just sit there. Now here, we're in the salon again. We're going up the stairs we're going to go up the stairs to what's called the Ruskin room. It's a court, well, first we're going to go and see a room. This is where you stay when you come. I know a number of you have stayed here. That's a Peter Potter photograph, sorry. And here is the Ruskin room from the outside. This is the place where Elbert and Alice used to come and do some of their thinking, some of their writing. It's of course fitting that they would name the top floor the most interesting place on campus after John Ruskin. And there's a lot of course, paranormal stuff associated with this, the pyramidal shape, and another writer on the campus, Mason Winfield, has written many books about paranormal, and especially having to do with Roycroft. But this is on top of that. So on top of that Craftsman Lounge, where you're going to come have a beer with Alan and me someday. And that's the back of the inn, the restaurant. Good restaurant too. Great spot to center. It's the center of the village. If you're coming to East Aurora, you can walk to just about anything you would need to see. But see, there we are, right on Grove Street, right in the middle of the village. It's such a remarkable place in the middle of a residential community. It's perfect. I was blessed to call that home. This is another Peter Potter photograph. This is in the Ruskin Tower looking out. And this is now the banquet office where if you're going to plan a banquet, that's where you'd come. So this is the last major building built on the Roycroft campus. This is the powerhouse. It was destroyed by a horrible fire in 1997. But back in the day, 1910, this is what powered the campus. And they had a series of underground pipes and channels that heated the whole campus. Nowadays, if you look over to the left here, right there, that's where Alan hangs out during the day. That's his office. There are museum quality exhibits in this visitor center. It's where you would go to sign up if you're going to give a tour. And here, of course, they do workshops here all the time.
Well, we've almost come to the end of our little tour of the Roycroft here. I hope you really enjoyed it. And I hope you get a sense of Ruskin and Morris and Elbert Hubbard and 500 Roycrofters all here together in this amazing complex, working, turning out beautiful books and objects of art and furniture and utilitarian. So I thought it would be really fun if we ended right here. This is my favorite place on the campus. With the tower above us, with this door right here. You know, it's no longer the great entryway that it was, where people would come, and this would lead to the staircase where you would go up to the tower well, where Elbert and Alice would do their best work, their writing and their thinking, and developing this philosophy that would engulf this campus. But it's locked now and stuff, but it, you know, a couple years ago, I was working on the campus. I had this project where I would paint all the trim on this massive building. And you know, my contract, my mission didn't include working on these doors. But, you know, as I looked here, I felt that I really needed to help this old door out. I love this place in the campus, this corner here. I come here and sit often. You know, it's kind of out of the way now. I can sit right here and I can just relax, get a drink in the whole notion of Roycroft right here. So I took it upon myself actually to fix this door. It needed some help. It had grade and weather, and it really needed to be treated with some good coating. So I sanded and I sanded and I sanded, and I sort of got it to come back. You know, oak, we love oak. We love oak as a wood. It's regal. It's got this stateliness to it. But you know, for an outdoor wood, it really isn't that good. These open grains here that make it look so distinctive, they're not great for outdoor use unless they're really carefully maintained. So I decided I was going to do that. But you know, I learned in that as I uncovered the gray that was covering this saying, I sort of felt the confluence here of Elbert Hubbard and William Morris and John Ruskin. Because in doing this, I had found my work. This was important for me to do it. And I was truly blessed, truly blessed. So thanks for coming along to see Roycroft in 2020. Hope you enjoy it. And we've got plenty of time for questions if you've got any. So thanks for coming.
All right. Well, there you have it. And again, thanks to Peter Potter, to Kateri Ewing, and to Adam Hansen for their part in this little presentation, this little tour on an October morning. And happy to have any conversation you want. Great. So I stop share.
We are unmuted now. Okay. Anyway, a very quick question, Rick, and that is
Yes.
about blessed is the man who has found his work. Is that Ruskin or is that Hubbard or who is it?
I think it's Hubbard.
Uh-huh.
I think it's Hubbard, but I'm not, well, I thought it was Hubbard, but we could look that up and see. Is it, what do you think, Alan? Do you know any different?
I am not sure, but I know Hubbard liked to borrow sayings from others
He
and
did.
use
He
them
did.
as his own.
Yes, indeed. I mean, when you see a Hubbard saying, and then you look it up on Google, you find that perhaps somebody in 1320 first said it, and he just kind of co-opted it. But I'm not sure. But it certainly is part of the doors. The doors say it, and Albert's was a big fan of carving on doors. Put it that way. So I was happy to find that one.
That saying is by Thomas Carlyle. And
Thomas Carlyle, yep.
There you go. All right. All right. Well,
Alan? Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, Linda.
This is sort of an interesting thing that I picked up when I was doing a tour, and this is several years ago, but a stonemason was on my tour. God only knows why, but anyway, and it was great. And when we went to the buildings with the bricks, with the round brick, all the bricks that they brought in from the farmers, and I was telling him that story, he said, a stonemason didn't do these buildings. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure it was just the Roycroft workers. He said, you had perfect examples of this with your pictures. Some of them, they have a whole bunch of little stones together, he said a stonemason would have made a design out of that. So every time I walk and look at the buildings, even though they're 100 years old and held up very well, I just sort of smile when I think of that. So just the regular workers from the Roycroft put that campus together.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Can you imagine putting a print shop together in that time period? Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of hard physical labor, isn't it? Yeah.
Rick, we got a couple questions here. Do you know where the original door handle on that refinished door is?
I do not. I asked when I was working on it, and nobody knew. So nobody that on campus knew. So I don't know if someone else would know, maybe town historian or somebody. I don't know.
I know there is another door that was an exterior door on the print shop that has been moved to the interior.
Correct.
We're not quite sure who did it, but they moved the door from an exterior to an interior. They cut it down, and they actually took the doorknob and hinge off of the one side and put it on the opposite side.
Uh-huh.
So there has been, quite a lot of change to that door, but that is one of our projects that we hope to refurbish and move the original handle back to it.
Yes.
In many cases, these handles have been taken off, and we're not quite sure, what happened to them.
Right. Yeah.
Another question, Rick. I think you mentioned that you'd written about the Roycroft, anything historical available, or about your amazing lifetime connections.
Well, yeah, there are some things on my website, which is just rickohler.com. There are a couple things there that you can find, and I'll put up a couple more. There's a couple pieces. There's a piece that I wrote for the reopening of the inn in 1995 that I will put up there shortly. Sort of that supposes someone coming to Roycroft in that time period to see what was going on there. And as Alan and I were speaking earlier this morning, I mean, a half hour you can't even really get started on Roycroft, and obviously on Hubbard and on Ruskin. But I'm hoping that people will that have not been here will come here. And I would also suggest that you take a look on some of Adam Hansen's. There he is, right there. On some of his Facebook page, he's got some beautiful drone. He's got some drone footage all throughout the campus too. So I mean, as you know, anyone who's done video knows you shoot 3 hours of video for 16 minutes of exposure. So, but yeah, there's stuff on my website, and I'll make sure more is available.
Next question: did Frank Lloyd Wright ever visit the Roycroft campus?
Yeah, we don't think so. And we had that question last week, I think, didn't we, Peter? I thought we had that question last week. And I think people have tried over, and here again, I'm not the historian, Alan is the historian.
I was going to say, I'll answer after you.
Okay. I think people have been trying for years to get these guys in the same room, and I don't think it's going to work. I'm sure they probably knew. I'm sure Hubbard knew of Wright and maybe vice versa, but I don't think they ever hung out.
So I'll answer that question now, and I will say yes, they did meet. Frank Lloyd Wright actually built Elbert Hubbard's sister's house, and we do have evidence that they met in that house. There is also some evidence that Frank Lloyd Wright did come to the Roycroft. The dates that we have for that are after Elbert had already passed away. Yeah. And that Frank Lloyd Wright was hiding one of his mistresses in the inn for about a month.
Okay. All right. Well, so
that's a talk in and of itself, I'm sure.
There it is. There it is. All right. Well, ain't history fun,
I have a question about, is the Ruskin room on the tours? They are not, the Ruskin Room is not on the basic or in-depth tour. Every once in a while, we do have a specialty tour that does go up into the Ruskin Room. Since it is a working office, we can't kind of just go up there on a regular basis, but we do have certain dates and times that we do go up to the Ruskin Room. And it's amazing space if you've never been in there.
Yeah, it is amazing. Yeah. You know, I will say, if you just happen to go up those stairs and pretend like you're lost, they'll usually speak to you. You know, if they're working up there. I've been up there a couple times where I just said, "Oh gosh, I didn't know where these stairs went," and they'll talk to you.
We have a question about how articulate was John Ruskin when he met with Elbert Hubbard at Brentwood in 1894.
That's a Jim Spates question.
I was going to say, I'll hold off on that question till my talk. How about
Okay.
that?
All right.
Are you going to answer that?
What was that?
Are you going to answer that in your talk?
Well, I will have an answer to that. Yes.
Okay. We'll wait then.
And Jim and I can discuss afterwards if you want. Sort of personal, do you have arts and crafts furniture in your own home?
Do we?
No.
I don't know if we do. No, I don't think we do.
We have hand-me-downs.
No, we have hand-me-down furniture, and no, we don't. But we know people who do, and that would be. And I would answer that by saying, when, you know, in times when I need to think deeply, and I've got a writing project or something, I will often go and sit in the salon at the Roycroft. And Dan Garvey, who runs the Roycroft, is a marvelous guy. He's been there the whole 25 years it's been reopened. You know, one time I was sitting there and I just said, Dan, I just need time to just kind of meditate and think and stuff. And he said, what do you want in your coffee? And sure enough, didn't the whole coffee service appear free of charge while I sat in the salon and did my work. So that's where my arts and crafts furniture is, right there on South Grove Street.
Another question about the furniture. Is there original furniture in the lobby? Original Roycroft, I'm sure it's a mixture of old and new.
It is.
Yes.
It is. But the stuff that's new was done to the specs. And I know that Tom Harris and Ben Little did much of it. So it is a mixture, and I don't know which and which, but the docents over there will be able to point that out. I should mention too that there are docents on the campus, but there are also docents that are specifically at the Roycroft Inn, and it's great to make. And I don't know if they're doing that during COVID. I should preface that, of course, because
I don't think they are.
I think everything's different these days, but
Yes.
Hopefully one day we'll be able to tour the inn itself again. Marvelous place.
Okay, we have about 7 minutes before the next talk, so why don't we stop here for now and take a short break. You can either sign off and sign back in or just walk away from your computer for a few minutes, but we'll start up again right at noon then.